I've been painting Space Marines for a hot minute, but recently I painted up a Chaos Space Marine, a Black Legion Space Marine, and it was really interesting. I'm feeling a little bit chaotic, and I have a fresh box of Chaos Space Marine Legionaries to play with. The Legion I want to tackle today is the Emperor's Children, and I want to get ahead of Games Workshop on this, because at some point this year, Games Workshop is going to show off the Emperor's Children in a proper range refresh. Actually, it's not really even a range refresh, it's going to be a range, because currently there is one Emperor's Children model, and it is a very cool Noise Marine guy. It's like a rock and roll guitar player, which is a really fun miniature, but I can't imagine that is the look that Slaanesh is going to have moving forward in 40K. I'm really interested to know what that look is going to be, because currently there's no real design philosophy for Emperor's Children. I guess there's the Demonettes and their pointy chariots and stuff, but other than that, there's nothing really to go on for Emperor's Children, so I want to see about making my own, and I guess we'll see how close I get to Games Workshop's idea. Cracking open this box of Chaos Space Marines, I already lost the instructions, but that's okay, I'll just guess what parts go together. Really, the legs and torsos don't matter much. They're all about the same, and for Chaos Space Marines, these parts are connected. New Chaos Space Marines are pretty short compared to Primaris Marines, so I want to try to make this guy as tall as possible. On his backpack, I cut off the little peg and glued it on super tall. This would look weird, but I'm planning on fixing it later with the shoulder pads. Next, I drilled out the bolter barrel. I always drill down the shaft and the funny little round muzzle brake. Then I prepped the arms and glued these on low. He is hip firing that blaster, which reduces his accuracy by 30%. Now it's time for his shoulder pads, and for this I'm gonna make up a little bit of green stuff. I picked out two reasonably fancy Chaos shoulder pads and put some small balls of this into the shoulder pads and stuck them down tall. These are barely sitting on his shoulders, but because they're so big, it actually looks pretty normal. His little noggin will sit between these shoulder pads, a lot like the old Saturnine suits of Terminator armor. For an Emperor's Child, I have to go with the ponytail Chaos head. It slips right in there. Hopefully he never has to look too far left or right. Well, now I got a little decision to make, because initially I wanted him looking ahead in the direction of travel in line with that front leg, but there is something powerful about parallel with that bolter just looking right at whatever he's shooting. Although I don't need to make this decision yet, because I'm not done with that head. Slaanesh is weird. I feel like the generic angry Chaos face isn't right for one of the Emperor's finest, turned to the ruinous powers of the Prince of Pleasure. I stuck this head down to a paint handle with some blue tack, and then I grabbed my nail art beads. These work great as rivets for vehicles, but now I want some big ones for eyes. Slaanesh is all about excess, and this Marine doesn't want to miss a thing. I found two glass balls of equal size, and I found a drill that matches the thickness. I used the point of my hobby knife to make a dent in the original eyes and started drilling, going slow and double checking often to get these eyeballs sunk about halfway into his face. I used a toothpick to get some super glue into his eye holes and pressed the beads into his head. The bug eyes remind me of the doll eyes of Chaos Demons. Slaaneshi worshippers want to see and experience everything, and today's sponsor has a lot of cool things to see. Painting is recreating the world in miniature form, and often that leads to questions, and Hungry Minds, the ultimate guide to rebuilding civilization, is perfect for getting those questions answered. The book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding Civilization, is a 400-page, full-color, beautifully bound hardcover book full of imaginative illustrations for what to do if you find yourself in need of rebuilding any aspect of the modern world. I found the section on paint pigments really interesting, with beautiful illustrations showcasing the different materials that can be turned into paint, with information on how to create a matte versus glossy finish. And the welding section is spot on. I've done lots of oxyacetylene torch welding, but I've never known how to make acetylene until now. The book covers hundreds of topics from food, fire, shelter, power, weapons, anything you would need to know to rebuild civilization. The art in this book is phenomenal. It takes every opportunity to show dynamic cross-sections and detailed mechanical diagrams on the topics, as well as including lots of pop culture references, which makes for a fun Easter egg hunt as you digest this book. This extravagant tome, the book, The Ultimate Guide to Rebuilding Civilization, is a big mix of science and historical facts about topics spanning from all over the world. Every question can be answered in this one big, beautiful book. Follow the link in the description to get the book, and prepare to fill your mind with the best tips, tricks, and facts that'll give you an edge when it comes to rebuilding civilization. I still have some green stuff from his shoulders, so I decided to do some sculpting. I rolled the balls out flat with a paintbrush under some baking paper, and I cut a long thin triangle with my hobby knife. This'll be his long tongue, spilling out of his helmet and giving his bolter a good lick. I still have some more green stuff, so I want to try making some cloth drooping off of his shoulder pad. I rolled the green stuff out flat and then cut it in half so I had a straight edge. I used a piece of paper to roughly draw out what I want so I can see it flat and then try to match it with the green stuff. I put super glue on the flat part of the green stuff and then tried my best to get it to stick and bend right. This was really hard. Some tweezers helped a little bit, and eventually I got something resembling cloth, and I used a toothpick dipped in super glue to get some more glue along the seam. I did the same thing on the other side. I think the second try worked just a little bit better than the first one. It's not the most convincing cloth, but I'm not the best sculptor. Every time I get out the green stuff, I like to try to do a little bit of sculpting because I've got so many ideas that I would like to be able to get on the models, but when it comes to sculpting those, I know I'm not good enough. Yet. Eventually, I'll be good at it. Now, what kind of a base would be good for an Emperor's Children? I want him to be very fancy, so I think I want to go with a relatively plain base. I started off with some half-inch cork. I want to use the base to give my Chaos Space Marine some more height so he doesn't look so small around Primaris Marines. Then I dremeled the top of the cork to make an uneven surface, and I used the point of my hobby knife to chisel some holes into the base. I added some brass rod into my Emperor's Children's legs and stuck them down, stabbing them into the cork. Then I put texture paste all over the surface. This doesn't look like much now, but it'll look much better once it's painted. On the tabletop, I play Space Marines, but I'm kind of jealous of the Chaos Space Marines because in my opinion, they're a little bit better in two major ways. Number one, they can take cheap units. They can take cultists, they can take Renegade Guard, they can take demons, they can take accursed cultists. Regular Space Marines are excellent, but you pay out the nose for that excellence. So you've got like 6 or 7 units that you really don't want to die. Chaos Space Marines can take like 6 or 7 units that they don't really care about. They can flood the board, and that is a major advantage. And the major advantage number 2 is Chaos Space Marines can fit in a Rhino, which is crazy to say, but Space Marines no longer fit in a Rhino. Anything wearing Primaris boots can't set foot in a Rhino. It's so annoying and has fundamentally changed how Space Marines play. Because you want to move your 10 blocks of Space Marines around the board, you almost can't do it. 5 guys can fit inside of an Impulsor, but you don't want to take an Impulsor because it's pretty expensive and it only transports 7 guys. And so then you have to upgrade to a Repulsor, but the Repulsor is 180 points because it's got too many guns and its special rule synergizes too well with Eradicators. So it's way overcosted. And so my Space Marines just have to foot slog or deep strike around the board, and it's just not as convenient. It's not as perfect as the classic good old-fashioned Rhino moving your Space Marines around the board. And Chaos Space Marines, they still fit in a Rhino, so they're good to go. Also, I play Black Templar Space Marines, and our big thing is Righteous Crusade. I get to pick if all my Space Marines get lethal hits or sustained hits, which is an amazing ability. All Chaos Space Marines Legionaries baked in, they can take a Dark Pact to get lethal or sustained. They get to pick whenever they want. Every single time they fight, they can try to do it. And so for me, I have to try it at the beginning of the game, decide, is this going to be a lethal hits kind of a game, or is this going to be a sustained hits kind of a game? Do I want good punches or lots of punches? Chaos Space Marines, they get to make the decision right before they punch, so arguably that's kind of better. Oh, and special ability of the Legionaries, reroll wound rolls of 1 unless you're fighting something on an objective, which you should be, in which case you're rerolling all the wounds. They're kind of just regular Space Marines, but better in every single way. I see why people turn to the powers of the Dark Gods. I prime my mini in black because I want him dark in the recesses, but not black. I sprayed every inch of him with purple. Then I took a bright saturated orange-brown and sprayed this over the base. These two colors are really saturated, and I want this to show through on the final product. I loaded up my palette with neon pink, and white paint, and then I got the dry brushing. I rubbed this pink all over, hitting the raised edges and missing the recesses. Once I was happy with the pink, I mixed in some white and did another round of highlighting, and then I did a final dry brushing of the neon pink. This is how bright I want the armor to end up, but I want the recesses and details a little bit darker, so I thinned down some purple speed paint and I put this over the mini, working fast with a big brush. Once this was dry, I redid the dry brushing and now he's got a lot of fun contrasts. But now it's time for the dreaded Chaos trim. I grabbed a teal speed paint and put this over the trim. Speed paint is a good tool for this because it flows off the brush, so I don't have to work the paint into every little crevice. Once I hit all the trim, I mixed some shiny silver paint with teal to make a highlight color, and I put this on, doing a rough non-metallic metal, picking out about half of each piece of trim to highlight. I mixed this silver with white paint to make a bright highlight, putting this over about half the silver to make the brightest spots. After that, I came back in with just some teal paint and glazed this on between the silver and the original blue to soften the transition. I used this teal mixed with speed paint blue to base coat his tongue. Either he just has a blue tongue, or he just ate a bunch of blue raspberry airheads, which does sound like something a Celestia cultist would do. I used white paint to highlight his tongue, and then black paint for his eyes and top knot. I put some little dots of gray and white paint as the reflections of his big, ultra-dilated eyes, and I used the gray to highlight his hair. I put gloss medium over his eyes and tongue, and I thought of another fun way to make his tongue gross. Oohoo glue. This is a contact cement that gets really stringy as it dries. I took some of this in a toothpick and I stretched it over his tongue, making gloopy trails from his shoulder, bolter, and armor. And you know what else is good and sticky? That's right, our website. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find our merch, like our new Nick and Jay dice, and the best way to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members will get a credit that they can use on our new monthly terrain pack or any previous pack we have ever made. For the month of January, we made The Fall, Part 2, Guns. Big guns. This set focuses on printable high-caliber ordnance ready to rock a battlefield. This set features the enormous battle cannon, a building-sized gun encased in a Gothic shrine for sending 100-pound shells into orbit, the sun cannon, an energy turret for throwing hot balls of glowing energy across the landscape, and the humble field artillery for mopping up whatever's left. This set perfectly complements the Fall buildings and is the second of 3 sets focused on getting a proper 40k board up and running as easily as possible. The next thing on this little legionary is the chapter symbol. There might be a transfer available for 30k that could get the job done, but I'm just gonna freehand it. I started off with the same orangey brown I used on the base, and I mixed in more and more yellow, doing a few layers to build up the brightness of the eagle wings. In the lore, the Imperial Aquila comes from the Emperor's children. They were the most faithful of the Emperor's Space Marines. It took quite a while to get the eagle wings just right, so on the other side, I just painted a Roman numeral 3, representing the 3rd Legion. Now that everything on the mini is done, it's time to tackle that base. I started off dry brushing the yellow I used on the Aquila, then I grabbed some yellow pigment powders and I made up a slurry of this, rubbing it all over the base, getting it into his feet and legs too. I really like pigment powders because they dry incredibly matte and it makes the painted mini look distinctly different from the base. Once that was dry, I used a watery paintbrush to fix any clumps of pigment powder that I didn't like the look of, and then I stuck down some dark brown gamer grass tufts. These are the right color, but in my opinion, they look a little bit too perfect right now. I mixed up another batch of pigment powders, this time mixing it with alcohol so it's super runny, and then I dripped this onto the grass tufts. This sunk to the bottom and made them look much more realistic. Now the only thing left is to make my marine a little bit more chaotic. It's time for some blood for the blood god. I dip a springy brush into the paint and used a toothpick to pull back the bristles and fling the paint off. I like to practice this a couple of times before doing it on my mini, to get a feel for the size and the shape of the splatter. When I felt ready, I threw this onto my marine and then I gave the base a glossy black rim. I really like him. He's pink. He was really fun to paint. I mean, I'm not planning on starting a Chaos Space Marine army. I have no need for a Chaos Space Marine army. I already have Death Guard, but I like him. I like the pink boy. A little while ago, I painted up this Black Legion Chaos Space Marine, and I kinda like this paint job better. Like, I think this is a better painted mini, but this color scheme, it doesn't get me super jazzed. Like, I don't care to paint up like a Mauler Fiend or a Lord Discordant to see more of this color scheme. I do kind of want to see what those models look like painted up in pink in this color scheme. And I think this color scheme has some legs. He's pink with blue trim and just a little bit of gold. And he's a Legionnaire. If I was painting like Chosen, then I think I could invert it and I could have him be mostly gold trim with just a little bit of silvery blue. And I think it would look really, really good. I could do white armor with like pink accents for hero characters, maybe even play around with the different combinations for vehicles. It all looks really good on the desert bases, which really emphasizes the crazy colors on the model. I can't start another 40k army this year. I'm already starting 2 new 40k armies. I can't do a third. And I already have Chaos. I have Death Guard. I've been puttering around with Death Guard for like 4 years and I have barely 1,000 points painted. So maybe that's the rule. Maybe if I finish my Death Guard, then I get to think about starting another Chaos Space Marine army. And maybe that Chaos Space Marine army would be pink. Yeah, that'll be the rule. Unless Games Workshop comes out with something really cool this year. Then maybe I'll do it.